The Memory Den. No other words bring so much distraught to the minds of Fallout 4 speedrunners. Long seen as a mid-run hurdle that destroys the pacing of the speedrun, a skip to the Memory Den is a wet dream to anyone familiar with Fallout 4 speedruns. The Memory Den is the subject of hundreds of hours of tinkering, theorizing, and even April Fool's pranks. My name's Tomato Anus, the airbud of speedrunning, and welcome to Speedcucked.
When I wake up, the stars, they come into my heart, and they all love you like I love.
For anyone unfamiliar with Fallout 4, allow for me to lay out some basic information about the Memory Den's importance to the game. The Memory Den is arguably the most important location in Fallout 4's story, and is the location where maybe the most pivotal quest in the game takes place. If you're unfamiliar with the game, the general storyline of Fallout 4 is as follows. You play as either a man or woman who has a spouse and an infant son, Sean, in the year 2077. Out of nowhere, bombs drop and America is turned into a wasteland. Fortunately, you entered an underground bomb shelter called Vault 111 with your family just in time to survive. Unfortunately, the vault is an experiment and you and your family get frozen. After an indeterminate amount of time, you thaw to see your spouse killed and son kidnapped by this bald dude who you later find out to be named Kellogg. You're refrozen, only to thaw again at some point in the future and set off to find your son. On your search, adventures are had. You kill a Deathclaw, mark your map, hate some newspapers, encounter a few glitches, and eventually find yourself face to face with Kellogg. Turns out, he doesn't have your son, but was hired by a body known as the Institute to kidnap him. After a brief confrontation, you claim some augmented body parts from him and head to a place called the Memory Den to go through Kellogg's memories to determine the location of the Institute. It turns out that the Institute has no actual entrance and teleportation is required to enter and exit their facility. This then begins the next act of the main story, which entails the sole survivor building the trust of one of three factions enough to build a teleporter to enter the Institute and find your son. Now that you're caught up on why the Memory Den is so important to the story of Fallout 4, why is a skip for it so desired in the speedrun? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Memory Den absolutely destroys the pacing of the speedrun. It's a 6-minute segment of slowly walking and standing around. It's practically an auto-scroller where you have no control over how fast it goes and you just have to wait for it to end. If we were able to find a way to skip the memory sequence, not only would it make the run more enjoyable, but it would save at least 6 minutes in the run. Now that we know the motivation for searching for a memory skip, I'm going to list a handful of facts about Fallout 4 in the speedrun. This list will hopefully help you easily keep track of requirements to complete the game and why the Memory Den is required to complete the game. It will also serve as a rudimentary list for where we can and have looked for ways to skip the Memory Den. The first item on this list is that the moment a speedrunner is able to enter the Institute, they are able to finish the game. The second on the list is that in order to build the teleporter to enter the Institute, the sole survivor needs to have a decoded courser chip. Lastly is an essential NPC named Virgil spawns after we complete the memory sequence. Now that we have this short list, let's dive into why the Memory Den is leaving us speedcucked. As I just mentioned, as soon as a speedrunner is able to enter the Institute, we can complete the game. This means that it is most logical to look to enter the Institute before ever going to the Memory Den, as we could just finish the game without ever needing to go there. As far as we know, there are 4 ways to enter the Institute. Fast travel, the Public Works load zone, the CIT Ruins load zone, and teleportation. Fast traveling to the Institute is only possible if you've already been inside of the Institute and completed the quest Institutionalized. This would be redundant to do, as we need to be inside the Institute to get the fast travel point, which would be a waste of time if we could just go and finish the game right then. The Public Works load zone entails the player entering the Institute through a pipe that is hidden in the Public Works maintenance area. This is an entrance that is intended to be used by the player late in the main quest line if they become an enemy of the Institute and need to enter the Institute for a quest. Unfortunately, this entrance is not loaded by default, so if you clip out of bounds to get to its location, you can't use it due to it not being there yet. This load zone only spawns when you get far enough in a certain quest. Similarly, the CIT Ruins load zone entails the player entering the Institute through a hole that the Brotherhood of Steel blast into the ground in front of the CIT Ruins with Liberty Prime. If you toggle collision with the command console, you can see that the hole exists below the ground, so if we found a way to clip into the ground here, we could fall in. Unfortunately though, this load zone is also not loaded due to not having progressed certain quest lines far enough. You may be asking, why can't we just sequence break the required quests to access these load zones? Well, there's a lot to these load zones and the related quests, so going in depth with them is something that would require an entire video on their own. For those interested, this is an idea that we refer to as Early Institute. Would it become a reality, it could potentially shave upwards of 20 minutes off the run and skip the memory den entirely. The fourth and final method of entering the Institute is teleportation, which is what we currently do in the speedrun and is the intended way to enter the Institute for the first time. Unfortunately, this method requires us to complete the memory sequence for a couple reasons, one of which being the Courser chip. As I mentioned in our initial list of facts to keep track of, a decoded Courser chip is required to teleport into the Institute and therefore complete the game. In the story of Fallout 4, the Courser chip is in a Courser's brain and allows for them to teleport from anywhere in the Commonwealth to the Institute. The sole survivor secures a Courser chip by talking with a Courser and then decodes the chip with the help of Tinker Tom, which allows you to teleport into the Institute. So, in order to build our teleporter, we need to get a Courser chip. So where can we get one? Well, it turns out the only way to get one is via Z247, a Courser who spawns inside GreenTech Genetics as a part of the Hunter/Hunted quest. So why can't we just go there right away and get it from him? Well, there's two reasons for that. The first is that the door to GreenTech Genetics is destroyed and not interactable until you begin the Hunter/Hunted quest. Now, I know what you're saying, but Tomato, why can't you just go to the roof with item climbing and enter the door that's up there? And to that I say, good idea, but that door is locked from the inside. So we can't get inside of GreenTech Genetics until we start the quest. But let's say that maybe, just maybe, someone found a way inside before starting the quest. Can we get the Courser chip from Z2 then? Nope, because he doesn't spawn until you start the quest, which is the second reason why we can't just go right away to get the chip. If we were able to go straight there and get the Courser chip, then we would do that from the get-go and build the teleporter super early, skipping the memory den in about 10 to 15 minutes of the run overall. So it seems that in order to get the Courser chip, which is required to build the teleporter, which is required to enter the Institute and complete the game, we need to start the Hunter/Hunted quest. So how do we start the Hunter/Hunted quest? Well, we have to talk to Virgil. Virgil is a former Institute scientist turned super mutant who helps us out with our plan to teleport into the Institute, and he's also the one who informs us about the Courser chip. So why don't we just go and talk to Virgil right away at his lab in the glowing sea? Well, that's because Virgil doesn't spawn until after you complete the memory den. If you go into Virgil's lab before you do the memory sequence, he's nowhere to be found. If you use the command console to locate him and then go to those coordinates, he's just not there. He will only spawn after we complete the memory den quest. This means that in order to get to the end of the game, in order to get into the Institute, in order to build the teleporter, in order to get the Courser chip, in order to talk to Virgil, we need to complete the memory den. So it doesn't look like there is any way to bypass the sequence entirely. But what about sequence breaking the quest itself and completing it? Now, before I get into how the quest is set up in the game's engine and all the info surrounding the quest, I'm going to explain how quests work in the creation engine. I apologize for all this info I'm dumping on you and will continue to dump on you, but it's all important to fully understand the situation. Quests in the creation engine have three different kinds of names. Their normal name that is shown in the Pip-Boy and HUD, the editor ID, which is used in the actual scripting of the quests, and the form ID, which is typically used in the command console. An example of this is the quest in the memory den itself, which has the name Dangerous Mines. Dangerous Mines has an editor ID MQ202. The MQ indicates that the quest is part of the main quest, the 2 indicates the quest is part of the second act, and the O2 indicates that this is the second quest in the second act. It's important to note that while Dangerous Mines is the second quest of the second act, it's actually the first of Act 2 that you receive in the game. MQ201 is a quest titled The Enemy of My Enemy and is actually a sub-quest. Subquests are typically scripted events that are referenced to in other quests, like in this case it's a dialogue between Piper and Nick. Scenes are typically scripted as subquests because they're a set piece of their own, or just to keep clutter down when looking at quests when scripting. Quests themselves are split up into a bunch of little chunks called stages. Each stage has a number assigned to it which acts as an ID for that stage. Naturally, a stage numbered 5 will be earlier in the quest than stage 15 of the same quest. Each stage has a task that is required to be completed in order to finish that stage and progress to the next one. Typically, stages are completed when you do things like finish dialogues, enter a trigger zone, or kill an enemy. Here's an example of a quest trigger zone. When you enter this highlighted area, your quest stage for MQ302 Min automatically updates to 350. This is the trigger zone we exploit to get the nuclear option quest early in the speedrun. Now that we know how quests generally work in Fallout 4 and the creation engine, let's talk about Dangerous Minds specifically. After killing Kellogg and retrieving a piece of his brain, you arrive at the memory den with a quest stage of 155. There, you talk with Dr. Amari, who puts Kellogg's memories inside of Nick's head. You then sit down in a memory lounger and are uploaded into Kellogg's memories in Nick's head, updating your quest stage to 300. At this point, the quest stage will then update to 310 and begin the subquest MQ203, which is titled Shattered. Shattered is the quest that pertains to strictly things inside of Kellogg's brain as you progress through his memories. This subquest has several quest stages of its own, but they all refer to walking into/through each memory, which are titled A through H respectively. Once you get to memory H, you have to wait for the scene to play to completion, after which the TV will become interactable. By interacting with the TV, it updates the Shattered quest stage to 1000, which returns you to the memory den to exit the lounger. At this point, we can shoot Amari once to skip her lines. This will advance the quest stage to 320, which finishes Dangerous Minds and spawns Virgil. This means that if we are going to sequence break the quest itself, we need to get Dangerous Minds to stage 320. The only issue is that 320 only seems attainable by finishing our dialogue with Amari. There doesn't appear to be any other triggers for this quest stage. So what if we were to do something like load warp out of Shattered and attempt to talk to Amari? Firstly, if you load warp out of the memory sequence and go to Amari, she will only say intro dialogues like "what do you want," and you won't be able to progress any quests. Secondly is that when you enter the memory sequence, the player is assigned a ghost status. This means that the player can't sprint, can't pull up your Pip-Boy, can't take out weapons, can't attack, and can't do most other things. This ghost status persists through loads, so if you load warp out of the memories, you will still be a ghost. This ghost effect can only be removed by finishing Shattered via activating the TV at the end and getting the quest stage to 1000. It also appears that getting this quest stage to 1000 is what triggers Amari to be ready to talk as well. If you use console commands to set the quest stage to 1000, your screen will fade to white and you'll spawn back in the memory lounger performing the whole exiting sequence as if you had just activated the TV, with Amari talking to you and all. So, if we load warped out of the memory sequence, not only would we barely be able to play the game properly, but Amari won't be ready to actually talk since our quest stage for Shattered still won't be 1000, and she'll still be waiting for us to finish the subquest of Shattered by interacting with the TV at the end. So, if we can't just load warp out of the memories and talk to Amari to progress the quest, then what about attempt to abuse a related quest into thinking we completed the memory sequence? Here's what I mean by this. It turns out that there's one other quest in Fallout 4 that involves going into someone's memories. That quest, believe it or not, is called Memory Den. For clarity's sake, I'll be referring to this as the Memory Den quest. If I just say Memory Den, I'm referring to the location. The Memory Den quest consists of reliving your own memories and watching your spouse get murdered and Sean be kidnapped all over again. In order to save time and money, Bethesda only made one memory sequence area. Brief side note, the memory sequence area is actually what you are inside of and watch during the freezer cutscene at the beginning of the game. This memory sequence in the Memory Den quest takes place in the exact same corridor that you walk through in the memory sequence of Shattered. So what if we were to get both quests at the same time and enter just the Memory Den quest where we relive our own memories? Well, it turns out that doing that just completes the memory den quest and has no effect on Shattered or Dangerous Minds, which makes sense. But what if we instead entered the memories of Shattered, then load warp out of the memories, be in ghost state, and enter the memories of Memory Den quest? Well, when the memories of the Memory Den quest finish, you'll be brought back into the Memory Den building and still be in the ghost state. The Shattered quest will not progress at all, which makes sense since that the quest is specifically tied to you sitting through the cutscene of the final memory and interacting with the TV. One interesting thing to note is that every time you enter the memory sequence, you're given the ghost state. That includes if you already have it. If we load warp out of one memory sequence, we still have the ghost state, and entering another memory sequence adds on a second additional ghost state. When you exit a memory sequence the correct way, the ghost state of the respective quest is removed, but you will still have at least one other ghost state effect on you. So, trying to complete Dangerous Minds and Shattered with another similar quest doesn't work. What other ideas are there? One common method to skip dialogue in Fallout 4 is to shoot the NPC you're talking to. Shooting someone while they're talking can have one of several results. The two most common are that the NPC will either skip to their next line, or they will start attacking you and it'll skip their dialogue entirely. So what if we try and do that to some capacity for Dangerous Minds and Shattered? Well, if you somehow are able to enter a memory lounger and go through Kellogg's memories after aggroing the NPCs, they will still be aggroed to you when you exit the lounger. This is of no benefit because no time is saved, and also Amari won't start her dialogue that we need to finish to progress the quest. However, there is actually one decent time save that was discovered in this segment that involves aggroing the NPCs. If you shoot Amari after she instructs you to sit in the memory lounger, she will start attacking you. Nick is technically our companion for the duration of this quest, so he will start attacking her then. If you wait for Nick to start attacking her and then shoot Amari enough to down her, then put away your gun to de-aggro the NPCs and sit down in the lounger, it will skip an approximate 27-second dialogue that you would normally have to sit through. This saves about 22 to 24 seconds in total, depending on how clean you are with the whole downing of Amari part. Because we put away our gun, everyone forgives us, and when we exit the lounger, Amari is completely fine, albeit a little bloody. With all the information we've gone over so far, it doesn't really seem like there's anything else we can do. The few potential avenues for skips and time saves seem to be blocked in one way or another. Everywhere we looked, doors just kept seeming to be slammed in our face. One week in the spring of 2017, myself as well as a few other runners were on a Memory Den binge, spending hours each night trying to figure out anything that might help us skip the sequence. During this stretch, a runner named Gingenia discovered that if you make a quick save upon sitting down in the lounger and then load warp out, you'll be put back in the lounger despite load warping, but you'll be able to access your Pip-Boy. When you use your Pip-Boy while in the lounger, your character stands up, probably because the game doesn't have an animation for you being in the Pip-Boy while sitting in the lounger. The reason we believe why this glitch happens is that when you sit down in the lounger, you get two input enable layers on your character. Input enable layers are part of the game's engine which are used for disabling or enabling player input. This is actually what the aforementioned ghost state is, but the community has just taken to calling the other one a ghost state. Anyways, when we sit down in the lounger, we get two layers, one which disables a ton of stuff, including your Pip-Boy, and the other which does things like lock you in the position of the lounger. For some reason, load warping away disables the first layer I mentioned, which is how we're able to pull up our Pip-Boy. This glitch was then built upon by another runner named Brongle, who discovered that if you put power armor right in front of the lounger and do Gingenia's standing Pip-Boy glitch, that you can then access the power armor by mashing E the moment you put your Pip-Boy away. This causes for you to exit the lounger and be able to walk around while Amari goes through the dialogue of uploading you into the memories. Pulling up our Pip-Boy rams our character through the lounger, which then is what allows for us to interact with the power armor. This then disables the second layer which binds us to the lounger. When we do this, we still have full control of our character and can do whatever we want. The thing about doing this is that the moment we initially sat down in the lounger, it put us on a timer. As soon as the timer hits 0, the screen will fade to white and we will be put into the memory sequence regardless of where we are. So if we do this glitch to be able to move around during the timer and win across the map, we would still be brought into the memories at the end of the timer. Also, regardless of where you're standing when the timer expires and you get brought into the memories, you'll always be back in the lounger when you exit the memories. When you're running around like this, the behavior of the NPCs is pretty interesting. Dr. Amari will continue to do her dialogue about uploading you, but she is invincible during it so we can't do anything to her. If you talk to Nick, his dialogue is the same as if you had just finished Shattered. In addition to that, the dialogue that the playable character says is what you normally say at the end of the quest, where you inform Nick you're going to go to the glowing sea. Unfortunately, if you load warp to Virgil's lab, he still hasn't spawned yet. The most interesting thing about this discovery though was what happens if you enter the power armor before you get put into the memories. That's right, power armor inside of the memories. Even though we have power armor, we still can't access our Pip-Boy, Sprint, Crouch, or any of those things. We still can't even enter third person. The only abilities we have from having power armor in the memories is the ability to enter and exit the power armor and access to a limited container. So why is the fact we have power armor so exciting? In Fallout 4, there's a glitch that we call power armor clipping. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's performed by standing in front of a wall in third person with power armor on. You then proceed to exit the power armor, and while you're exiting, you frantically try to look left and re-enter the power armor. If done successfully, you'll re-enter the power armor and you'll be displaced into the wall. Once the animation completes, you'll be on the other side of the wall and in the power armor. This glitch was a staple in older routes of the game, but has since fallen to the wayside with the introduction of gun clipping and other glitches. Now, this glitch seems like it would be pretty irrelevant in the memories since we can't enter third person, which is a requirement for the glitch. Fortunately, there's an infinitely more difficult variation of the glitch that only requires you to be in first person. Instead of standing in front of a wall and exiting and re-entering in third person, instead we just exit in first person but do a quick rotation while the game registers our inputs. This is because logically you can't exit your power armor if your exit is blocked by a wall or object. But if we begin our exit while facing the wall and rotate quickly enough, then we will exit the power armor and go through the wall. This is a pretty big development for one reason. We can perform this clip to exit the last room in the memories. When we perform a clip on this wall, we will then be standing on a small invisible ledge outside of the room. You may then notice that there are a couple floating platforms with doors nearby to the final room. All of these doors lead to each other, with one leading to the door that the courser enters the final room through. This was Bethesda's method to having the courser walk into the scene at just the right time. Have him go through some doors to time it out perfectly. Now, these doors got us thinking. The first thing that I tested when we found these doors was what happens if you make a save next to one and then load an old save as a character who is yet to enter the memories and then proceed to load warp to the door. Just a quick preface, the character who we tested this with is one who has progressed the Dangerous Minds quest up to the point where we are prompted to sit in the memory lounger to enter Shattered. Well, this does as you'd expect with our understanding of load warps. You spawn in the final room but as the character who hasn't progressed this quest at all, so nothing is spawned. This includes the path to the previous memories. There's an invisible wall in the place where it normally is and you can't go exploring. Interestingly, the TV that we normally interact with to exit the memories shows that you can interact with it. When you look at it, the game gives you a prompt saying Memory Lounger E exit memory. Unfortunately, attempting to interact with the TV does nothing. You're just stuck in this room as a regular character. The next thing that I tested with this was to load warp to this door, but as a character who just sat down in the lounger. Maybe advancing the quest stage past what it was on the other character will do something for us. Well, upon the initial load warp, we'll be in the final room, but nothing will be loaded other than the TV screen. We aren't even able to move. After the timer expires on Amari's dialogue, we then get teleported into the start of Shattered and everything is as normal. But here's where it gets super interesting. If you then proceed to make a quick save with this character and load warp to the door again, we will be in the final memory and everything loaded and ready to progress. We just need to wait for the neuron path to spawn up to the room and we can then trigger the scene to begin. Obviously, this would be a waste of time to do in an actual run, since we would have already ran down the path and began the scene once already, in order to set up the save by the door. But the fact that the scene can begin isn't what's interesting. What's interesting is that this gives us full control of our character. We can sprint, crouch, jump, enter our pip. That's right, we're invisible. But we have complete control of our character and can even shoot. If you really want to have your character be visible, if you make a quick save and load warp to the door again, you'll still have full control of your character, but this time you'll be visible. If we load warp out of the memories in this state, everything will be the same as if we had load warped out of the memories upon initially entering it, with Amari being stuck in the dialogue and Virgil not spawning. So now what? Well, I just mentioned that we're able to shoot while we're in the memories if we perform this glitch. If you're familiar with Fallout 4 speedrunning, you'll know that shooting people is one of a number of ways to skip dialogue. Logically, that was the next thing that was tested. Unfortunately, shooting both Kellogg and Sean do nothing for advancing their dialogue. They don't even react to you shooting them. X688 is a different story though. If you shoot X6, he'll react by aggroing to you and shooting you. He can actually kill you from this. We, however, cannot kill him. X6 is tagged as essential and the best we can do is down him. If we do so, he'll actually continue his dialogue with Kellogg while he's down. Unfortunately, his lines still don't get skipped by shooting him. Interestingly, attacking him in the memories will not put us in bad standing with the Institute. But I guess that makes sense with how we later kill a Courser in the main story and they don't mind since we haven't met them yet. So again, we hit a dead end. After all these discoveries, the well ran dry and we didn't really have any other ideas of note. That was until about 8 months later. Brongle provided the biggest development that we had ever had in terms of skipping the memory sequence. And let me preface this with, while it is a monumental feat, an incredible work by Brongle, and a huge stepping stone, it only handles half of the equation when it comes to the memory sequence. Now, onto the skip. The first step is for the playable character to position a suit of power armor on the side of Green Tech Genetics here. The coordinates of this location correspond with the coordinates of the center of the final room of Shattered. The character then sets up a punch warp with a frag mine in this location, storing our coordinates to be right next to the power armor. In addition to this, a frag mine is deployed and left at the location you arrive at when you fast travel to Green Tech Genetics. This can be done before setting up the power armor to save time. Now with our punch warp set up, we go to the memory den and set up a second set of power armor outside of the lounger. We then do the series of actions to be able to walk around while on the timer with Amari's dialogue. We then immediately load warp out of the memory den and go to Green Tech Genetics. During the fade-in of our arrival, we trigger our punch warp to then be right next to the power armor. After a few seconds, our screen will begin to fade to white. If we then quick save and quick load, the white will disappear, but we're still on a super short timer before we appear in the memory sequence. If we time it just right, we can begin to enter the power armor a moment before the actual loading begins. When we then load into the memories, we'll be standing in the last room. This skips having to do the entire running segment. This power armor teleport is a glitch that was found previously that is best described as being called an animation warp. If you begin the animation of putting a fusion core into power armor as you start loading into an area, when you finish loading, you'll be in the coordinates of where the power armor was in the original cell. Obviously, doing this glitch as we load into the memories results in having to still wait for the Kellogg and X6 dialogue to begin, and then sit through the full thing. But being able to skip the walking segment is a huge accomplishment in itself. There's just one small snafu though. The walking segment itself takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds to complete. This whole complex walking segment skip, well, it takes about 1 minute and 30 to 35 seconds to execute, meaning that if we were to do it in a run, we would ultimately be losing time. That isn't to downplay the skip though, because it is still the closest anyone has ever gotten to skipping the sequence completely. If we didn't need an extra set of power armor and could interact with something else like a terminal, then this skip could possibly save time. The only issue is that the coordinates are pretty precise, and there aren't any terminals or anything similar in the remote area to the coordinates that work. Technically, there may be a terminal at the correct coordinates somewhere in a random interior cell, but if there is, we haven't found it yet. Despite Brongle finding the skip in December of 2017, there haven't been any other advancements in our understanding of the memory segments since then. Well, there was a recent discovery for causing yourself to stay in the memory den inside of Power Armor rather than entering the memory sequence, but it's the same as just load warping out, so it's not much help. There's just so much to sort through in terms of what we already know, and seemingly nowhere else to look. We've spent hours upon hours messing around with things in the game, as well as within the creation kit, trying to look for any quest triggers that we may not know about. Despite discovering all these things, so many glimmers of hope, the door keeps closing in our face. Who knows, maybe we just can't see the forest for the trees because we're so involved in it and have delved so deep. If you have any ideas, feel free to leave me a comment or shoot me a DM on either Twitter or Discord and let me know your thoughts. I currently have a $250 bounty out for whoever finds a way to skip entering the memory sequence in a manner that is both faster than going through it normally and is also applicable to the any % route. Until then though, the memory den will continue to blue ball us runners and continue to leave us speedcucked. One thing that feels even worse than being speedcucked is when people get their grimy hands all over your data, which is why you should use a VPN, but not just any VPN, NordVPN. NordVPN is having a limited time offer where if you purchase their 3-year plan at nordvpn.org/tomatoanus and use code tomatoanus, yes that is the actual code, you'll get 75% off the base price and pay only $2.99 a month, plus you'll get a free additional month thrown in. That's like 2 candy bars a month. Stop buying that junk and buy a VPN instead. I mean, come on. With NordVPN, you get military grade encryption on your data. You can double VPN yourself so that people think you're in Russia, but you're actually in Sweden, but you're actually in the US. With NordVPN, you can secure up to 6 devices with a single account. That's your computer, your phone, your old laptop that you keep under your bed for special occasions, your burner phone that you use to call your honeys, and whatever other devices you use. My favorite part about using a VPN though is tricking Netflix to think you're somewhere else in the world. My favorite movie of all time is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982, but it's not on Netflix in America. No problem, I'll just make Netflix think I'm in the UK and boom, I can watch it anytime I want. Let's be real, we both know you need a VPN, so go to nordvpn.org/tomatoanus and use coupon code tomatoanus to get 75% off plus a free additional month. If you've made it this far, I just want to apologize for how long it took to get episode 2 of Speedcucked out. My original intention was to release it within a couple of months of finishing episode 1, but life is crazy, you know? These kinds of scripted videos take a lot longer for me to make than just a typical commentary video, since a lot more goes into them, between making sure that everything is 100% accurate and conveyed in an easy to follow way, and proof checking everything with Brongle and Gingenia, without whom this video wouldn't have been possible. I do have plans for an episode 3, which pertains to another Fallout 4 topic, but beyond that, I'm not too sure where this series will lead. Maybe episode 3 will be the series finale, or maybe we'll start to cover other speed games. Only time will tell. Until then, I've been Tomatoanus, thank you for watching, I appreciate you, and I hope you have an above average day.